Mantic 9000 series triple disc clutch install video here. Just quickly walk you through it. I know that Mantic has one on their site. So this is just another video out there sort of doing the same thing that's already been done. But I wanted to point out a couple extra things, especially for those that are installing clutch discs that are used or they have the markings worn off. I want to show you a little bit about that to help you in case you get in a situation where the markings aren't quite visible. So one thing I wanted to note or show you here is that each clutch disc has a flat side or a raised beveled side. So the raised bevel side is going to be the flywheel side for the first two clutch discs. So the bevel to raised side is going to point towards the flywheel for the first two discs. And on the triple disc, the last disc, or if you have a twin disc, the last disc, which would be the second on the twin disc. But in my case, the triple disc clutch, the last disc is going to orient in reverse of that. So the beveled side, or the side that sort of is protruding, is going to face outside towards the flywheel or the towards the pressure plate on the last disc. So to know that, again, if the markings are gone, the beveled side, not the flat side, the beveled side, first two discs, flywheel, reverse it, pressure plate, beveled side on the last. So that's one way of knowing how to orient the disc. Now I'm using a Mantic lightened flywheel, which is a steel flywheel. They've just more or less cut insets out of it to lighten the flywheel. And I street and also road race, so I really like the lightened assembly. I believe it's 25 pounds lighter than stock, which is that's a lot when you start talking about rotational mass off of that crankshaft. So that's a good thing. And I know that probably my favorite thing about this clutch, other than holding 4-digit power, is going to be the fact that the drivability from the lightened flywheel. Now, if you drag race, probably don't want a lightened flywheel. You like to go a heavier flywheel that gives you better 60-foot times, better launch, more mass off of the launch. But again, my particular setup, it's perfect. I really like it. So that's why I went with that specific this specific setup. Now I'm using a flywheel lock tool down here. You can see where it bolts up underneath right here where the oil pan essentially bolts, and then the teeth lock nicely right into the flywheel assembly. That I got off eBay, I think $25. I'll put a link down below. And one other thing to note, and you can't see it here, but I'm using ARP fasteners for my flywheel. You can upgrade to ARP fasteners, which I highly recommend, especially with something, going over 1,000 horsepower. You really want to ensure that you have proper torque specs, and especially on things like flywheels that can come off and cause a lot of damage, including body damage. It's worth it going with enhanced fasteners. So I upgraded to ARP fasteners with thread locker. So minimum blue, but recommended red. You can still pop those off. Again, you're talking about pretty serious stuff here. Okay, to start, let's go ahead and get this going, because it's not really anything that is too complicated, and it's already out there. So I'm just going to point out some other things and sort of run through the install real quick. So we want to put the clutch blocks on first. So just run through that. Pretty simple. These flywheel bolts essentially have little insets cut into the back of the flywheel that lock them in place. So you don't need a wrench or a socket or anything on the back to keep them from, or prevent them from spinning. That's pretty nice. I like that. Mantic didn't have to do that. It's just one of those little things that really make a big difference to me in install. I'm not having to hold the pressure plate, hold a wrench, and then also try and tighten nuts. I mean, it really, those little things make a big difference. But again, you're talking about a $3,000 clutch, so they should they should go the extra mile, in my opinion. Okay, so again, pretty self-explanatory. We're going to take the first clutch disc, the beveled side facing towards the flywheel. Now, they include two flywheel pressure plates, or flywheel discs, sorry, just other flywheel discs. And the first one, you can see, only has springs on one side. So you want to take those springs and orient them facing the flywheel. Just like that. Now, second clutch disc, we want the beveled side facing towards the engine, flat side towards the flywheel. Towards the pressure plate. Sorry about that. So, real quick, one thing I wanted to note is when you align these discs, it makes a lot of sense to align them with the clutch pads oriented in the same spot. That way you have all this rotational mass balanced as well as it can be, right? It's not going to be perfectly balanced, but the little things like this, orienting the clutch pads is recommended, and that keeps everything as balanced nicely as possible. So this inner disc or inner plate, flywheel plate here, is going to have springs on both sides. So that's how you know it's the inner plate. Now, another thing that is crucial is you want these springs to be in the same orientation as the springs on all the plates, and that is pretty self-explanatory. You want the pressure when the fingers on the pressure plate engage or push in on these plates. You want all the fingers to be aligned so that you don't get a binding of these plates, right? You want everything to, if you see here, they're all in a row. So when you get that pressure squeezing, they're going to be nice and in a nice single orientation and pressing evenly together, not one offset from each other. And then of course, the second benefit is having rotational mass all nice and balanced. So we'll keep that in mind as I keep saying that. All right, so the last clutch disc, remember we orient with the opposite direction. We want the beveled side facing out. I'm going to orient the disc pads all in the same direction here. Okay, and now I'm going to leave the clutch install tool in now that I've got all three discs all nice and oriented and all those inner plates on. So the last plate we have is the outer plate, and I'm going to put that in. There's no special orientation there because there's no springs other than the bevel facing outward. So the bevel faces outward there. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull all these bolts out. Press the bolts as far as possible. Okay, that'll help me line everything up. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, and this isn't recommended by Mantic, but just a personal thing for me, I'm going to put some blue. I've got the gel Loctite. I'm going to put a little bit of blue gel Loctite on the fastener threads They use special sort of lock washers. So again, this is not recommended, or it's not stated by Mantic to do, but it's just an extra safety measure. It doesn't hurt, absolutely doesn't hurt anything. So make sure I get that coated all the way. And I like this new gel. I think you can get it from Permatex. Just doesn't drip, makes it nicer coating on there. One other thing, I'm using nitrite gloves, but try when you're doing a clutch install to keep the clutch disc face as grease free as possible. That's self-explanatory. You know, brake disc cleaner, that kind of stuff. Yeah, just ensure that the clutch face and the flywheel face are very clean. Touching them with your hands, believe it or not, you have a lot of oil in your hands, and that's common sense as well. But you get in a hurry and you sort of skip that, and you know, I don't know how much oil on your hands would cause any problems, but again, this is something that, you know, on a C7Z is a lot of work to change a clutch, so I'm just gonna be sure that I spend a little extra bit of time and just do it right. That's my recommendation. You got a lot of people that just, you know, again, get in a hurry or get frustrated, and that's when you sort of cut corners and can cause you problems. So, all right, I'm going to install the last part to this, which is the pressure plate. Now, one thing to note here is they've notched out an area to for the nut. And you need a thin wall socket here for sure. I don't even know if my thin wall socket is enough. We'll find out. But again, just know that you need a thin wall socket. They didn't really notch out a lot of room here, and that can really stop you right dead in your tracks. So that would be my advice: is getting you a thin wall socket ahead of time. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start one nut on here just to keep this from falling off. And then what I'll do is go ahead and install these supplied lock washers. And these lock washers, I don't know if you can see, but they have a sort of a etched surface. Let's see if I can hold it right. But they have an etched surface there, and that etched surface faces outside towards the nut. So I'm going to put that on, and let's start the nut on that. And you're going to torque this down, of course, in a star sequence, and I'll get to the torque specifications in a second here. I'm just going to get all these sort of started and get one of these bottom ones on here, and I'll get a couple torqued down just a hair to help me finish installing the rest, because there's not a lot of tolerance here. So I'm gonna use the two outers with the washers to just give me enough room here to get the washers and the nuts tightened on the rest. And then we'll actually go back and we'll torque these to the required specs. All right. Almost done here. There's not much thread to get started on here. I'll tell you, they make it a little bit challenging for you, for sure. Gotta love it when things are not just completely simple, right? There's always something. And this last one here is being a little bit of a pain. So let me see if I can get it started here. My hands are a little bit slippery here. Okay. All right. Let's get that one on. And make sure, I can tell, so what happened is that nut wasn't quite turned to fit in the notch in the back there, so that's what was happening. So let me get that started. And I dropped a washer here, and there is no telling where that went. That's not good. Oh, there it is. Okay. Thank God. They're little, so you want to be sure, be careful when you're working with these little fasteners, because these little washers can get lost. And again, when you lose one of their washers, you're out of luck. I have no extras, so I'm gonna put that first one that I started just to hold the pressure plate on. Again, don't forget that. If you start with without a washer, be sure to include that. And then here's my last bolt. We'll go right there with the washer already on. Okay. So just going to make sure everything is just sort of finger tight. I mean, barely finger tight. Just nice and even enough. Just where I'm holding equal torque, I would say, to start out here. All right. So let's see if we can look to the specs for torquing down. Okay, so let's see here. So tighten each nut 1/2 turn at a time. So that is important when you're going around this in a star pattern, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Just walk your way all the way around. Star pattern. We're going to tighten each one nut 1/2 turn at a time. Diagonal location. Final torque is 33 Newton meters. So let's see if I have 33 Newton meters on my bigger torque wrench here. I am right at it. So barely at 33. That's let me see if I can get my other torque wrench here. I've got a smaller torque wrench here, which makes probably more sense. So let's see what I can find. Newton meters, go all the way down. Newton meters. So, actually, I'll just use my other torque wrench. It's I've got a better setup on this one. So let me find some reducers, and which I have up here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start here with trying to get this off. It's a little tough. Getting one of my reducers off here. So when I do this, it's probably going to make a lot of noise. So, and this really, I don't even really need to take a video of this. But half turns, right? Just doing half turns. So start, you know, obviously, and do a half turn. I'm gonna walk my way around diagonally and do half turns. And initially, I know that this is going to be pretty easy until I get down to my torque wrench specs. So I'm going to do half turns until I get to, there we go. All right, last bit here. Bigger torque wrench will give me the ability to see the half turns nice and easy. All right. So again, I'm going to start in a star pattern here. I'm going to start with the top, and I'm going to do a half turn, so not a full turn. Okay. Half turns. I'm gonna walk my way around. I'm gonna start from the bottom and go straight up. Half turn, bottom, straight up, half turn. And there, you'll see that it'll loosen others, and that's normal. We're just gonna, you know, keep going until we get there. Okay. Gonna walk around until we get to our torque specs, right? Okay, yeah, there we go. And then start pattern. All right, now we're getting there. So, yeah. Oh, here we go. Half turn. Half turn. Now we're getting there. Okay, half turn. Half turn. And now that that one's tight, I'm going to come around and make sure that I'm getting equal torque across all of these. Because, you know, again, this isn't necessarily going to be perfect every time, but you want to do your best you can to go on a star pattern, right? Walking your way cross, 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 right? So, okay. Go. All right, we're almost there. Okay. See if I got a, yep. So I kind of triple check everything when I do torque specs. Just going across again. Not necessarily perfect star pattern here, but I am just kind of checking all the, I know now that we're down to an equal sort of pressure plate torque, and that's the idea. So now I'm just going to go and make sure that I've got proper torque across all of these. I go a little overboard with that, but that's just me. And again, I still have the flywheel holding tool in place. Now with all the lock washers, with blue thread locker, it calls, as I said, for 33 Newton meters. And what it says here is that once installed, the fingers of your pressure plate should be dead even. And then when I look at the finger plate, or the fingers on this pressure plate, they are absolutely perfectly flat. So we know that we have the correct torque specs, correct variation and orientation of all the pressure plates and the entire assembly. I'm reading down here, if there's a variation of over 1 millimeter, the cover has not been fitted correctly and should be loosened and checked per procedure above. So that is absolutely critical that you ensure that this is really tightened down properly, and all of the pressure plates and clutch discs are installed in the proper orientation, because if you're off by 1 millimeter, it's saying essentially that it's not been fitted correctly. So check your specs, and just go over everything again properly. But I believe we're in good shape here. So that is a Mantic 9000 triple disc clutch install for a C7Z06. It's exactly the same pressure plate and clutch assembly for the C7, but this particular assembly is for the C7Z06. And hoping this will hold around 1100 wheel horsepower. I'm keeping the boost down to a manageable horsepower level for this 416, which is rated at 1400 wheel, but I want to have a really reliable setup, so that's why I'm sort of overbuilding everything here to ensure that everything is reliable. All right, thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe. Thank you. More videos coming soon.